Right, SilentEgo, another podcast. It's a privilege today to have Gary Fry, who is entrepreneur and chief executive from the technology industry, and we're going to go into detail a little bit later. But for our viewers and our listeners, Gary and I go back in excess of 15 years, and we did business together, I've got to say 15 years ago. Through EgoStream, and Gary at the time was working for Adobe, and he was he had a senior position in Adobe, managing director of Europe. And long story short, he was the catalyst to EgoStream's journey of 15 years, because he was good enough to sign a contract, give us some business, I think we call that, which enabled us to springboard a very healthy 15 years. So Gary, welcome, thank you. And this is my gift back to you. But I'd like to know what's been going on over the last 15 years. So maybe we can become a little bit nostalgic to kick off with, and then just talk about your journey and how it's been for you. Because I know that, you've been very successful. And I think we can safely say that you're now a veteran. But I remember when I met you, we were out there making it happen. So welcome, and let's have fun for the next 30-40 minutes. So how you doing, and how's the new venture, by the way? Because I know you've just started a new position as chief executive, and
I have, yeah. So 3 months into it now, and going incredibly well. So before I start about that, let me just reflect back to that 15 years ago, back in Adobe.
Yeah.
So when we discussed this last week, I was just thinking about what that was about and what that engagement was about, and reflecting that into the current times. And if you remember, Paul, the business or the IT world, or the technology world was also in transformation in those days. And I inherited a team of sales professionals that were also going through a transformation of selling bits or boxes.
That's right.
into trying to sell solutions, and trying to sell and trying to solve customers' problems, rather than just selling boxes and what they had. And I think all credit to you and your team at the time. You helped us change a pretty dysfunctional sales team into a really strong group of individuals that were solving customers' problems. And it was, and you look at today now, and that transformation is happening again in a very different way. Nostalgia is an interesting word, but we were certainly both a lot younger in those days, and probably more naive, and maybe a little bit more aggressive. But I'm pleased to be a veteran now. So.
Exactly right. And I think the kind of phrase is, the wisdom of the ages. As we all mature, we live and we learn, and here we are. But before we go into the future, I think that. I was just talking earlier this morning that we are on the precipice, as you quite rightly have identified. It's all about to happen. Technically for the next 10 years, we're in this great big upgrade. But going back 15 years, we just suffered coming off the dot-com crash. And what was quite interesting there was a lot of the predictions, if you remember right, Gary, these big forums we were probably both going to independently, learning about how the internet was going to take charge of our destiny. And, retail is a good example. And, in some respects, it was, predicted, wasn't it, 15, 20 years ago, but where we are now and what the future's looking like.
And you're right. I mean, the predictions were that we were going to be more connected, and devices were going to be more powerful, and information was going to be key. All those buzzwords that we had, back in the early 2000s. But you could never have predicted where we're at now. You could never have predicted that we're here on a Zoom call, with absolute clarity of data and transmission. And I've got my iPhone I've got more power on that than mainframes we used to sell in IBM back in the 90s. And the amount of information that we have now, we use as individuals, let alone as business people, we could never have predicted that. I mean, we could never have said that, I can get any information anywhere in the world that's accurate and up to date in order to do my job, my personal life. I can order anything I want, and it will be here tomorrow from a retail perspective. I don't think anyone could have predicted that. And you look forward now to the next 15 years. Yeah, what comes next?
Well, it's mind blowing, isn't it? And I mean, I'm pleased you've said that. But going back, and I was thinking about this morning in thought process for our conversation, Gary. But what phone did you have in those days? I mean, I think I had a Nokia. Yeah. It was pre Apple, wasn't it? I mean, Steve Jobs hadn't released any of this stuff, and
I remember. I mean, we all had Nokias. Yeah, Nokia was the standard phone, and they had a monopoly on the market. Yeah, even previous to that, we all had Motorola's. Yeah, so we had the big handsets, and I've always, partly because I work in technology, but I've always been an early adopter of any technology. And the speed and pace of just that handset change has been incredible. I remember being at an Adobe conference in San Francisco when the first iPhone came out, and America was the place they released them first, and I got one. I was very proud to have one, and I was just in awe that I could watch video live streaming. Okay, through Wi-Fi in those days, not through 3G or 4G or 5G now, but. I was just amazed that I had that amount of connection on that little tiny phone. But yeah, I mean, just think of back to the days of the poor old Nokia. Of our information then was a text message, and we could communicate via a phone call and via a text message. And you think now, yes, text and SMS and WhatsApp is used, but in a very different way than it was then. And how often do we have phone calls now? I mean, it's much more this type of forum and this type of interaction, and Teams meetings and Zooms meetings, and it's just absolutely the rate and the pace of change is beyond anyone's predictions, and that's the same. It's the same in not just the devices, but in the whole world we live in the data we consume, the data we store, the data we process. And it's great to be part of that. It really is. It
is, and I think I reflect back, and I found myself this week talking to somebody. I can't remember now who it was, but I think it was a coaching call I was doing via the glass room, obviously via the screens. And I remember introducing myself and walking through my background and saying, I've operated in technology for 25 years, and it's been very kind to me, in the sense of, going back a bit and talking about why we all got into it somehow. And we've all got stories about, why we did it. And I think one of them was obviously it was quite lucrative, and it was a dynamic industry, wasn't it? It gives you a lot of, it presented a big opportunity for you. And I think more so if you'd moved into sales in a more commercial capacity. Would you amplify that, Gary? Was that something that was a driver for you back in the early days?
Gosh, how did I? Yeah, that's a great question, Paul. I think it was partly an interest because I was always interested. When I was at school in computing and software and devices and technology generally was an interest, and partly. As we evolved into our careers, back in the late 80s, technology was one of the really interesting places to be, and it was probably later in the 90s where the real drive of the commercial drive of the money and the opportunity came out. But I think first it was the interest, and then the drive into the commercial side of the business was very much that. It was the shiny new toy, and there was sort of finance, and there was technology, and I was never clever enough to go into finance. The technology seemed to work really well.
I was also thinking, back in the day, I mean, nostalgia, it's interesting, you're winding it all back. The pace was different, wasn't it? We were, somewhere along the line, and we're a bit more frazzled now with it all as well. But, the pace was different. I remember, zipping up and down the M4, doing deals with different businesses and things like that. But I was just sharing a view. What car were you driving back in the day, back in the early days? What sort of...
Wow, gosh. I think my first company car would have been when I was at IBM, and it was a Rover 214 SLI.
Wow!
Red.
Wow!
I was incredibly proud of that car. It was great, and my phone, by the way, in that was a transportable. So it was you picked the phone up, it had a car battery attached to it. And I was amazed that you could actually make a call out of this thing. And I'd carry it into customers, my toolkit and my transportable phone, out of my Rover 214. You talk about being frazzled, and that's a big change, isn't it? In before technology overwhelmed us with this information, there was time to disconnect. Yeah, and you rarely get that time now. And our working day of ourselves and our teams has changed, and we have to be careful of that because you're always connected. You're whether it's email or meetings, you've always got data coming into you. But back in the day, you would disconnect. You would get home after driving around, seeing customers. And you were rarely contacted in the evening, and you would rarely, be on email or, and it's both a blessing and a pain having that access to information and data, and it changes the way we are. And not saying the pace wasn't hard, it was incredibly hard, and many of us were frazzled in those days also. But for different
That's
reasons.
right. Yeah, I mean, it was. But I think there was a sort of a spirit about it, wasn't there? And I mean, I was obviously running an executive search company at the time, back in the early mid-90s. And, I know when we met, we'd pivoted and become in a performance development company, and that's how we met. But I always remember back in the day trading company cars as part of the package when you were selling sales guys and, taking briefs from guys like yourself that were... one of my questions as a search guy is what's the car? Because it was a key important piece. And, if it happened to be a pale blue 3-door Escort, then there was a problem, But it's interesting how we've all moved on. And, that, as you say, that pace of change. But your points are kind of, it's interesting now because as we start to mature forward and we start to look to the future a little bit, you're right, work-life has merged, hasn't it? It's work and life, and I think the last 6 months particularly has actually driven that fusion. And now we're having to sort of almost like adopt a new working psychology for the future, which brings me on to Gary. I mean, I know that, but I've got one question actually. Can you remember the aftershave that you were wearing 15, 20 years ago? Can you remember that?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, you know what? I can't, Paul. I can't.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I can 30 years ago.
Right.
Only because it was a much bigger thing then. Yeah. So I remember buying some Lacoste aftershave and a square bottle with a Lacoste logo. It smelled rubbish. I mean, it was just awful. But the brand was important to me as a young person.
Yes.
But 15 years ago, I have no idea.
Yeah. No, it's in.
How about you, Paul? What were you wearing?
I think it was that actually, denim. Yeah. No, it's an interesting one. Going back, just reflecting back on some of the key things, and the fragrances, the suit and tie. We were wearing suits and ties, and our obviously how we dress now has changed as well, and that whole sort of big shift. But look, I mean, coming on to the, zipping forward, I'd like to go backwards and forwards as we march on, but you're currently with the new business, iText. I mean, what drew you to that? I mean, what's the future
Gosh, so 3 months into the new role, it's a very different role for me. Previous to this role, I've taken broken things and fixed them. Yeah, so
global graphics, yeah.
Global graphics, exactly, and I'll come back to that. But iTex is a very different gig. They're pretty much an unknown company based in Belgium, a software company. They provide a very niche product, which is the ability for large enterprise customers to create PDF documents, which comes back to my Adobe legacy, obviously, out of their existing systems. And to put that into context, not many people would have heard of iTex, but all the PDF documents that are out there on the web, people being distributed. We're the third largest distributor or author of PDF documents. So behind Adobe number 1, Microsoft number 2, iTex number 3. And you think about that for a second. You think about the strength that has in what we're providing out there to the community, and therefore the opportunity that gives us. So it's a very different gig. It's a great company. It's a company that's been growing 30% a year, nicely profitable, really nice owners in terms of, owners that are looking for an entrepreneurial spirit of how to harness that opportunity that they have. So as always, everything you take on is a different gig. This one's totally different. And, it seems 2 months in, a few surprises, but a great proposition, a great market, a hugely enviable customer base. And we have 6,000-7,000 of the top enterprise customers worldwide that license our technology. So it's a great base to build from. But it's everything I've done. It's a new experience because I like that challenge of trying something new. But it's better doing that than trying to fix something.
Right. Yeah. So you've moved on from the sort of the drains up, sort of digging deep, sort of fixing it, and the likes, which is a good, wise decision. With that in mind, Gary, over the last sort of 10 years, how would you say, from a human point of view, have you adapted your leadership style? I mean, is that obviously you learn a lot about yourself, don't you, when you're in these? When you came away from a major corporation, you moved into classified as an SME with Global Graphics. You did an incredible job there. You stuck the distance. You were there for quite a long time, best part of a decade, I believe. And, and then the new venture. So from a personal point of view, what have you gleaned and changed within you that's made you more compassionate or,
So there's a few interesting points there. So firstly, you mentioned the tenure at Global Graphics. I was there 11 years. To me, it was a 3-year turnaround. Yeah. It was a 3-year turnaround that took 11 years. But the biggest transition ever in my life was that move from the corporate world, from being a mid-level manager, if you like, in Adobe, which was a great company with a great proposition and some great people, into running an SME as chief executive officer. And anyone that does that or has done it or is looking at doing it, needs to realize that transition is enormous. And that was the biggest change, I think, of me as a manager or as a leader, because you when you're in a big corporate, you have a lot of support around you. You're taking somebody else's strategy and proposition, pricing, model, and you're transacting upon that. That's your task in a corporate. You're not. You may think you're driving product. You may think you're creating processes. You may think you're doing deals and creating pricing mechanisms. But fundamentally, you're transacting on somebody else's strategy. So that builds a level of confidence, but also builds a bit of a level of arrogance. And when I took on the job at Global Graphics, my confidence was at an all-time high because through the work you did and the successes we had in Adobe, it was all we were doing great. And we took Adobe from 55 million to 75 to 100, and it's the Benelux team that I ran. And so this little company in global graphics that was turning over 8 million euros, 120 people, losing money, taking that to 20, 30 million was dead easy. It's just simple. I mean, but it's it's but when you come into that, gosh, it was incredibly hard. People look upon you as the boss, if you like, or whatever terminology you want to use, for everything. For product direction, for HR issues, for processes, and every decision you take has a ramification of somewhere else in the business. So if you give that to somebody, then you have to be fair and equitable to somebody else. And this translates into so many different things that as you make decisions daily, they compel into a different story. And quite frankly, Paul, the first 3 years of that, I didn't do very well. We struggled. I mean, we built new products, we sold them, but we never made the breakthrough. And I had a very my chairman was incredibly patient. So I think a guy called Johan Volker, he was a 30% owner of the business. The business was public. He owned 30%. And he was incredibly patient. And he saw the mistakes that we made as a management team. And he gave good guidance and good coaching. And saw that there was something there that we could get out of this business. But yeah, so how have I evolved? I think that's the biggest change. That move from corporate to SME was huge. The arrogance and the confidence gets knocked out of you very, very quickly. Almost to the other degree where you become concerned about being able to make the right decision. Because if you make a few wrong decisions on your path, how do you pull yourself back up and give yourself the confidence that you're going to make the right decision? And then everyone looks for you. Everyone looks at you to say, do we have confidence in the lead person? And one of the big transformational changes in the way I looked at things was recognizing that it wasn't all about me, and it was actually about the team. So flipping that up. And actually, I then became an enabler of great people around me rather than it being me. And I think I went into global graphics being, I know everything and I can do it because I've done it before in the corporate world, to recognizing actually, I don't know anything. And actually, all I can do is get the most out of those people around me. And that was a big change in my mindset of, then it's all about bringing the right people that are functionally brilliant at their roles. The term rock star is used a few times, and I like that terminology, because if you bring the best people, you allow them to do their thing, and you harness that and allow that ability, then that gives you a much better outcome.
Yeah, and I think as you come off the back of that journey, and it's interesting, Gary, because in prep for today, we were looking for a digital footprint on Gary Fry, and there isn't really one, but that answers the question. You were busy missing in action. You didn't have time. So, that baptism of fire and that journey, and I think that's really key to some of our listeners and viewers today. If you're moving out of a major corporation into an SME or a startup, it can often be that baptism of fire. But however, I think, the nice spiritual message there, it has shaped you, and it shaped you to be probably a more compassionate, sort of humble individual, in the sense of, channeling the what our industry represents, obviously, is quite an egotistical one from time to time. And, I know the roaring 90s were, full of it, and the M4 was up and down with egos, but anyway, as we all mature on, as we become veterans, I think one of the nice takeaways there is that you become a more compassionate individual and more insightful in how things are going. So the next journey going forward must be, I wouldn't say a breeze, but you're bringing all of this expertise together now, and these pearls of insight to lead your new dance.
Yeah, and you're right. But the challenge is different again. Yeah. So you've then got to adapt yourself in a slightly different way. I would turn what you said around a little bit. You know, I'm still absolutely in it for myself. You know, my role is to create something that brings something back to me. It's just the way I've got there is very different. You know, in the '90s, we were all in it for ourselves, and we were climbing over everyone to get there. You know, it was a very different way. But I'm still there to achieve the goal for me personally. It's just how I get there isn't about me; it's about everyone else. And I think that's a big change. And yeah, in iText, you know, the challenge is very different. But I think coming in as a veteran with a bit more experience behind me and a few of the hard knocks, hopefully gives that referenceability to make the changes we need to make to keep that business growing and keep it on the track that it's been on for the past few years, you know, without me. And it's a little bit challenging because you don't want to break anything, so you're doing things slightly more methodically. But the context is exactly the same. It's creating that team that can do everything around you and just empowering them and letting them do it. And you know, I believe in anything you do. That's the right way.
Yeah,
of working.
no, it's really good sound advice, and it, you know, is the old classic. There's no I in team, and that obviously shines through Gary really well. So as you sort of you know, start to come forward, I mean, I know you're a keen sailor, and you're still getting much time to sail. And is there any sailing sort of metaphors that you bring into the business world, if you don't mind me saying? Because often there's that, if you've got a passion for something, you sometimes use those metaphors in business. You know, we've got the mainsail up or whatever, and you know, like sort of kind of like things.
Well, it's funny. I didn't think I did, but our office in Global Graphics was in Cambridge. Yes. And when we had a big refit out of the office, you know, the team had named all the meeting rooms after different parts of boats. So I guess they got that passion or the analogies through my sailing or love of sailing. But yeah, there's a huge amount of parallelism between sailing and business. You know, I've sailed since I was a kid. Yeah? I mean, I've been fortunate enough to do many things in sailing, you know, from sailing dinghies as a kid to, you know, sailing quite competitively, you know, in my 20s and early 30s in dinghies, and then offshore racing. We did a lot of dual-handed offshore racing with a very close friend of mine. We did very well at that at a very high level. And then you know, then comes a family. And you know, you've got work and family, and offshore racing doesn't quite fit into that because, you know, it's a huge time constraint. So I've focused on, you know, sailing as being very much a family trait. So my two children are both avid and keen sailors and very good at it. My wife sails. We have a boat that we race together now. So the four of us actually, you know, campaign a boat, and we don't race at the same levels that we used to. But we race competitively and we do okay. But I always use the teamwork and the analogies of running a boat back in business. And actually, I used to use my boat as a way of getting the management team together to get them out of their comfort zone into new places. And I after 3 or 4 years of doing this, I felt a bit guilty. I drag all this team down to the south coast and get them on the boat, and we do exercises and get them doing different things. And after about the 4th year, I said, you know, let's do something different this year. You know, let's do something that you want to do rather than it being my passion. And actually, they said, no, great.
But you knew they were going to say that, right?
I hoped, but yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, the teamwork of running a boat, for example. You know, when you've got 10 people on a racing boat, all doing different jobs, you can't micromanage those jobs. You have to allow and empower people to do that, and you've also got to give them information around how you're doing amongst the fleet. So there's a huge amount of parallelism between sailing and business, and I always use it. I probably overuse it, to be honest. And Those that have ever worked in my teams would have realised that they know I'm a sailor.
Not many men overboard, by the sounds of it.
No, not many. That doesn't mean zero.
I've got it. Yeah, and how are you adapting? With our current times, Gary, home is where the heart is for many leaders these days, and we're doing a lot of screen work. I call it the glass room, and I was talking to somebody earlier this week. Which was interesting that, and it doesn't take much to work out, but we're almost inviting our clients to our home offices these days. And, there's a kind of a new psychology starting to creep in. And I call, obviously given what I do and the likes, I'm thinking, what, we're now in a time where doing business is it's never been any different, but I'll term it to make the point. It's all about having intelligent conversations from your home office these days. It's not the classic sort of selling ways that we've had. It's honing and toning our skills in this new realm of doing business. And I call it the art of doing business through intelligent conversation. And I think, I don't know whether you're picking up on that with, working from home and operating through the glass room with your clients and team. It's interesting, isn't it? The changes.
It is. The pace of our adoption using technology is just. I still find it incredible. I have to say, the way when COVID was upon us in March, the fact that everyone worked remotely. In our industry, I appreciate there are industries that haven't managed as well, and I feel for those in terms of retail and hospitality industries. It must be incredibly tough. But in our industry, where it's about connection, conversations, understanding, relationships, the transformation in using this forum has just been incredible, and you can never have predicted it. I back to nostalgia. We come from the day where we were taught how to talk to people and meet people, and it was always face to face. It was about the sales call. You open a sales call, you create the need, you propose something, you close it, and you move on. And that's a face to face, and then you build a relationship, and then you use that relationship, and that relationship could be dinner, drinks, meetings, humor. All of those things come out, and that's very difficult to do, through the glass, or was perceived to be difficult to do through the glass. But it's been incredibly effective. My businesses that I've run have always been global. So I've always had operations in Asia and US. iText is the same. We've got office in Singapore, office in Boston, office in Ghent. I'm here in the UK. And it's just the adaptation that people have had to this new way of working has been incredibly efficient. And the trust that enterprises have now given their employees to not worry about clock watching or doing the right thing has also been overwhelming. And I think it will change forever. I don't think we'll ever get back to that sort of 9 to 5 or 7 to 9 in some cases, office working, where you have to be there to be seen to be doing that. And there's now trust in these communication mediums that will never change. I mean, that's within us now in 6 months, or less than that. It's just been amazing. But there's a challenge to that, of course, which is what we said at the start, is you're never off. And I think one thing you have to do is to find that off time. Whether it's a walk during the day, whether it's getting out of your chair and stretching your legs, whether it's leaving your phone behind or turning off in the evening and doing something you want to do as opposed to work. And that's the tough bit. I think that's the challenge.
I think it's the phrase I'd use, Gary, and it's a very relevant point, because I was up early this morning doing some work and I was thinking about the weekend, which is tomorrow, and it's come around very quickly again because the pace of change of time is just off the scale. And I thought, I'm going to have a go this weekend of actually switching my phone off tonight and not switching it back on till Monday. I'm going to have a go at it. Yeah. And so that was That was yeah, exactly. So, it's your points are incredibly well made, that all of a sudden that work-life integration has arrived, and, the whole psychology of how we're living is to change as well as. So it comes back to your point, which is what we're all experiencing right now, that, there's different demands coming in different ways, and we're all responding. But I think that's a really, really good insight. We're having to learn how to become more ritualistic about how we're doing stuff and find cut-off points. Because as you say, going back to the roaring 90s as an example, things were, dare I use this word, they were frantic, but there was more balance. There was that sort of off and on little bit. You couldn't get me after a certain time and the like. So, yeah, the future's interesting, but I think that we all know that the marriage between the human and the technology is on its way. And I think there's a lot of optimism technically for the next decade, en route. But you know what, Gary? This has been an absolute fantastic walk down memory lane, and that nostalgic piece of going back and how times have changed. But in essence, it's you flourished. You're doing incredibly well. I wouldn't say you've done incredibly well, because from what I've picked up, there's still the tiger in the heart, and you're still out there doing your thing. But I wanted to say thank you so much. And one final thing. Any advice for the young aspirants that are coming forward in the technology industry?
Gosh, what advice would I give to my younger self? It's just to challenge yourself. I think the things. If you look at people that come on board that try different things, then they tend to succeed. I look, there's in the business I ran in Global Graphics, we had 3 businesses under it, and one of my MDs in those businesses, his sons just got out in the world of working, and there's twin sons. One went to university, one went straight to work, and I won't mention the name, but the one that went straight to work has got out there and done things differently and used technology and put himself out there and challenged himself, and I see that and I love that in people. So I think the only advice I've really got is to do exactly that, and to think bigger and to challenge yourself and to push yourself out of your comfort zone, because the mind is an incredibly clever thing and an adaptive thing, and the more you can do that, the better you'll be, and the faster that will become. And you'll get some things wrong, and you'll make some mistakes, and that's okay. We've all made mistakes, good and bad, in personal life and in business, and those just build upon who you are as a person. But you never make mistakes if you stay in your comfort zones. So push out of it and do more and challenge yourself. And I think if you do that, then you'll have a more rewarding time, and you may come across opportunity that wasn't there, I guess.
Smart advice. So failure is the route to success, Gary. On that note, I wanted to say a great big thank you. It's a pleasure to speak to the soul in business, Gary Fry, on the SilentEgo podcast. Have a wonderful weekend, Gary, and look forward to staying close, so to speak.
Take care.